Dad, can I stay home today? The 8-year-old boy asked, pushing his pancakes around his plate with a dollop of jam. Igor looked up from packing his son's backpack, his expression softening. No, Vanya, I can't leave you alone all day. It's Saturday, and we might have to deal with some urgent surgeries. But we can stop by a cafe for ice cream afterwards. Come on, let's go. He finished his pancakes in a few quick bites and headed to get dressed. As he thought about his son, he felt a pang of sadness. Leaving Vanya alone at home was always tough, especially since Igor had been working as a surgeon at a private clinic for the past 5 years. When Vanya was just 3, his wife had left him. She packed her things and left with a truck driver, leaving Igor to manage alone. You ruined my life, she had shouted as Igor came home to find her with another man. You made me have this child without even asking if I wanted one. Now, if you want to play house, do it without me. With that, she grabbed a few belongings and walked out. Vanya cried at first, missing his mother who had been part of his life. But over time, he began to forget. When he had asked Igor about his mother, since all the other kids had one, Igor could only explain that some things were beyond his control. At the clinic, the nurses adored Vanya, showering him with sweets and teaching him how to bandage wounds. Everyone understood how hard it was for Igor to manage alone, so they made accommodations, letting him bring Vanya to work. Vanya, help me with the vitamins for the patients. Call Semenov from the 5th ward for his shots. Ivan Egorovich, could you please pass me the stethoscope? Vanya was always busy, sometimes doing his homework at his father's desk while Igor was in surgery or on rounds. He was a diligent student and well-behaved. Vanya also visited the patients, greeting them and asking if they needed anything. The patients looked forward to his visits. His presence brought a fresh perspective to their routine days. Vanya would chat about the weather and the interesting things he had seen, and many noticed that they felt better simply from having him sit with them, talk, or hold their hand. When a patient's condition didn't improve despite the medication, Vanya would often greet them, hold their hand, or gently place his own hand on their clenched fist or warm palm. Remarkably, the next day, their condition would often show significant improvement. While no one truly believed he was a magician or healer, there was a hopeful, almost unspoken belief in the possibility of a miracle. Vanya, could you be a good helper and fetch the thermometer from the 3rd ward for Grandpa Petrovic? The nurse asked, handing him a simple task while she organized pills into cups. The 3rd ward was a bit isolated, with a faded, worn-out number on the door. The clinic was in the process of updating its signs, and this one had yet to be replaced. Vanya quietly opened the door, planning to ask who Grandpa Petrovic was, but was surprised to find only one bed inside. Nearby were some unfamiliar, sharp-looking instruments. He stepped in cautiously and approached the bed. Lying there was an elderly woman who reminded him a bit of their neighbor. She was hooked up to various tubes and wires and appeared to be sleeping. Intrigued, Vanya tiptoed closer to get a better look at her face. Her eyes had delicate wrinkles and her lips seemed to curve into a gentle smile. She must be a kind person, Vanya thought. I wish I had a grandmother like her. As he sighed and prepared to leave, he accidentally brushed his hand against hers. At that moment, something strange occurred. It felt as if Vanya was in a dream, watching scenes unfold from the side. He saw glimpses of her life. She was with a man in a white coat, then she was brought home by ambulance, and later she was seen emerging from a house with a bundle while the man brought her flowers. He saw her sitting on a couch, crying bitterly as the man comforted her. Then the images blurred and faded, leaving the final scene of her looking older and alone. At that moment, the door to the ward swung open. Vanya, what are you doing here? Igor asked, standing in the doorway with surprise. Vanya, startled, quickly pulled his hand away, causing the visions to vanish. He stood there, looking around with a puzzled expression until his eyes met his father's, pulling him back to reality. What happened to this lady? Vanya asked, looking up at his father with concern. She's in a coma, Igor explained. She fell down the stairs and lay there for a long time before anyone found her. Why didn't anyone help her? Vanya's sympathy grew as he approached the bed again, feeling a pang of sadness at her isolation. She fell early in the morning. Her neighbor noticed she didn't come out for her usual evening walk and went to check on her. When she didn't answer the door, they had to call the police to break in. She had been unconscious for a long time. But you didn't answer my question. I was sent to get a thermometer for Grandpa Petrovic, but I mixed up the wards, Vanya admitted, looking guilty. As Yegor prepared to leave, he turned back. And who was the girl you mentioned? Where did she go? Yegor paused in the doorway as Vanya recounted the visions he had seen. Yegor knew his son had a vivid imagination, but this seemed like an exaggeration. It sounds like you've been watching too much TV or sci-fi, Yegor said, trying to mask his frustration. He was almost on the verge of tears, not believing his son's account. The neighbor had mentioned that the patient lived alone. Since Margarita Fyodorovna had moved into the cottage, the only person around was the gardener, who happened to be off that day. If there had been someone else in her life, they would have contacted the clinic by now. Vanya considered this. Could his visions have been just a figment of his imagination? He began to think about his next move. Where does the lady live? He asked, trying to sound casually interested but already formulating a plan. It turned out the house was close to the clinic. At 8 years old, Vanya wasn't a baby anymore. He knew the clinic like the back of his hand and could easily slip out unnoticed. With summer upon them, he didn't need to worry about grabbing his hat and jacket from his locker, which could have gotten him caught. As Vanya approached the cottage at the address he'd been given, he was awestruck by the grandeur of the house. Wow, what a mansion, he thought to himself. He walked along the concrete fence, trying to peek through to see what lay beyond. Moving further down, he spotted a balcony with intricate railings on the second floor. Just as he was feeling disheartened and contemplating leaving, he noticed the mailbox. Something white was visible inside. After glancing around to ensure no one was watching, Vanya carefully retrieved the envelope from the mailbox. The seal bore unfamiliar, non-Russian characters that he had never seen before. Hastily concealing his discovery, Vanya realized he needed to leave before anyone caught him. With his father's surgery taking precedence, their cafe outing was off for the day. But Vanya now had something important to investigate. He quietly slipped into the ward where Margarita Fyodorovna lay. As he observed her, he noticed a subtle change in her cheek, a faint pinkish hue and the slight fluttering of her eyelashes. Probably just my imagination, he thought. He pulled up a chair to the bedside and sat down, carefully taking out the envelope he found. Hello, you don't know me, but I'm Vanya. My dad works here as a surgeon and mentioned that you're alone with no visitors. But I saw you with a girl. Is she your daughter? Vanya continued to talk, filling the silence. I was at your house. It's so beautiful and big. How can you live there all alone? It must be a bit scary. He gently placed the letter in Margarita's hand, and her fingers twitched slightly. For some reason, Vanya felt that searching for her here was the right choice. Just then, his father entered the ward and noticed the envelope in the patient's hand. Even, Yegor said sternly, using his son's full name when he was upset. What's this? Where did this letter come from? It might be from Margarita Fyodorovna's daughter, he recalled, remembering her patronymic. We should probably read it. He looked at the nurse with a hint of urgency. What if it's from relatives? Yegor wrestled with his conscience over whether to open the letter, but practicality won out. The patient needed her family. The letter turned out to be from Margarita's daughter. She wrote that she had left her partner, Julian, and was returning to Russia. She was thrilled that her mother liked the house she had found for her and hoped to stay with her for a month while she found her own place. Well, she has someone after all, Vanya said, jumping with excitement. Yes, it's good news, Yegor thought, relieved he had opened the envelope. Now, they needed to find the daughter's contact details. He went through Margarita's personal belongings from when she was admitted, searching for a phone. If you want, you can stay here, Yegor said to Vanya, who nodded eagerly. When they finally found Margarita's daughter, Yegor was grateful that her phone wasn't locked. It was easy to find her contact details. After a few rings, the line connected. The daughter was at the airport, preparing to fly home to her mother. Yegor quickly explained the situation to her. She arrived with her suitcase and was ushered to Yegor. Despite her disheveled appearance and nervous demeanor, she immediately approached him. She had just managed to leave her partner, Julian. Though this thought briefly crossed Yegor's mind, he quickly focused on explaining the situation to Margarita's daughter and leading her to her mother's bedside. Vanya was still there. As the daughter saw her mother, she instinctively recognized her as the girl from Vanya's vision. She rushed to the bed. Mom, it's me, Lena. Can you hear me? Lena gently stroked her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. I told you not to go with that Gerard. Why did you let me go? Nothing good came of it. And now you're lying here. Lena sobbed. Igor had to gently guide her to his office. Once Lena had calmed down with some valerian, he learned more about her. Lena was Margarita's only child. Her father had passed away 3 years ago, and they had run a family business together. The publishing house had flourished since her father's time. Business was thriving, and soon an international partner expressed interest in opening a chain of publishing houses in France. The partner also took a liking to Lena. He was a decent guy, and her mother enthusiastically supported their budding romance. Despite this, Lena couldn't envision a future in either the business or the relationship. Eventually, she felt compelled to return home, and that's when things took a turn. Dad, Lena, Vanya burst into the office, his eyes wide with urgency. They all rushed to Margarita's ward, where she was sitting on the bed, attempting to detach the wires and sensors connected to her. Mama? Margarita Fyodorovna, this is a nightmare, Lena exclaimed as she entered the room. Margarita glared at Igor with feigned indignation. Doctor, why have you entangled this poor woman like a fly in a web? Let me help. Igor rolled up his sleeves and began assisting in removing the sensors. Just then, Margarita's gaze fell on Igor's forearm. Doctor, is that a birthmark on your arm? She asked, puzzled. Igor shrugged casually. Nurses arrived and set up an IV drip. Soon after, Margarita began to regain her senses. Thank you, she said, but this shouldn't have happened, especially not now. I need to finish my shift. With Igor's shift over, they were preparing to go home. Lena wanted to stay with her mother, but Margarita insisted she get some rest after her trip, assuring her that she wasn't in immediate danger. After some discussion, they invited Lena to join them, and she accepted gladly. On the way, they stopped at a supermarket, bought ice cream for Vanya, some fine wine for themselves, and tried to make the best of the day. During the drive, Lena shared more about her family. We were overjoyed when our son was born, she began. He was a healthy, strong little boy. I thought I was a good mother because he was always well fed. I played with him, sang him songs, and took him for walks. But once, when he was just 8 months old, I ran into a store for less than 5 minutes to get some formula. When I came out, the stroller was empty. I nearly lost my mind. Back then, there were no security cameras. We searched everywhere, put ads in newspapers, on TV, and even posted flyers. We offered a reward. He had a distinctive birthmark in the shape of a horseshoe on his forearm, just like yours, Igor. Everyone stared in stunned silence. Then all eyes turned toward Igor. I come from a respected family, Lena continued. My mother is a professor and my father is a doctor of medical sciences. They're both well regarded. I'm their only child. My father passed away 8 years ago, and my mother 5 years ago. She left me a letter, instructing me to read it only after her death. With everything that's happened, divorces and all, I got so caught up in life that I forgot about it. He slapped his forehead. It's in my safe. I'll get it. He hurried to his office, leaving everyone anxiously awaiting another revelation. When he returned, he held the envelope with trembling hands, despite his calm demeanor as a surgeon. May I? Lena asked, taking the envelope from him. She opened it with practiced ease and handed it back, her curiosity palpable. Igor hesitated, his anxiety about the letter evident. If I'm Margarita's son, then Lena must be my sister, Vanya continued. I was thinking of inviting her on a date. What was I thinking? Lena seemed to have similar thoughts, her face pensive and distressed. Margarita, lying on her pillows like a throne, looked utterly dejected, as if she had yet another secret to reveal. There's more, Margarita said, taking a deep breath as if bracing herself. I fell into a deep depression, lying for days, barely eating, and lost 20 kilograms. My husband eventually managed to pull me out of that state, but then I faced another blow. Hormonal imbalance meant no more children. Again, my husband supported me, saying there were children who needed parents. That's how Lena came to us. I told you I saw the girl, but you didn't believe me. Vanya looked at his father with a mixture of resentment and disbelief. Igor was stunned, at a loss for words. The emotions were overwhelming. Everyone realized they would need to process this on their own. Nyusha remained calm. As if in a dream, he took Lena's hand again. He recalled seeing her leave with a bundle, her father greeting her with flowers. And now, grown up and facing his own reality, Thank you for staying with the story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support it with a thumbs up. All the best.
My name is Kate, and I've been a police officer for over a decade. The precinct was my home, my colleagues were my family, and the relentless pursuit of justice was my purpose. Life was straightforward until I met Michael. He was everything I didn't know I was looking for. Charming, kind, and incredibly supportive of my demanding career. Our first meeting was nothing short of unconventional. It was at a charity event for the local police force. I was in uniform representing our department. "Excuse me, officer," he approached me with a confident smile. "Could you tell me more about what you do? I've always been fascinated by law enforcement." His genuine interest caught me off guard, really. "Most people usually just ask if I've ever shot someone," I replied, half joking. He laughed. "No, I'm interested in the real work you do, the stuff that matters." We talked for hours that night, about everything from police work to our favorite movies. He wasn't intimidated by my job, and I wasn't put off by his curiosity. It was a connection neither of us expected. Michael introduced me to his mother, Martha, a few months into our relationship. I could tell from our first meeting that she didn't approve of me. "You're a police officer, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's a rather dangerous job for a young lady." "It's my passion, ma'am," I replied, trying to stay polite. "Oh, interesting," she said, her eyes narrowing. "I hope you won't put my son in any danger." "Mom, Kate's job is something to be proud of," Michael interjected. Sensing the tension, "She's making a real difference." Despite Martha's reservations, Michael and I fell deeply in love. We were a team, and nothing seemed to stand in our way. But looking back, I realized that Martha's initial attitude was a sign of things to come. Her dislike for me was not a passing judgment, but a deep-seated resentment that would later turn my life into a living nightmare. We planned our wedding with excitement, choosing the perfect venue, the most beautiful flowers, and inviting all our friends and family. But in the back of my mind, Martha's cold gaze lingered. I brushed it off as mere nerves, not realizing that the wedding was only the beginning of a dark chapter in my life. Michael and I were about to embark on a journey that would test us in ways we never anticipated. The fancy wedding, the love we shared, all of it was about to be overshadowed by a secret that would shake our very foundation. In this struggle, my experience as a police officer would prove invaluable, but it would also expose the cracks in my relationship that I never knew existed. But all of that was still ahead of me, waiting to unfold on the very day I thought would be the happiest of my life. The day had finally come. After months of planning, it was time for Michael and me to say our vows. The excitement in the air was palpable, yet so was the tension. My uniform was replaced by a beautiful white gown, but my instincts as a police officer never left me. I could sense something was amiss, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The church was decorated with delicate white roses, and the soft glow of the candles created a magical atmosphere. Our friends and family were all there, beaming with joy, but Martha's eyes were like ice. "Kate, you look stunning! My best friend and fellow officer Sarah!" exclaimed as she helped me with my veil. "Thank you, Sarah. I just wish I could shake this weird feeling about Martha," I confessed. "Don't let her ruin your day. Focus on Michael and the love you two share," she reassured me. The ceremony was breathtaking. Michael looked dashing, and as we exchanged our vows, I could see the love in his eyes. "I promise to stand by you to support you and to love you unconditionally," Michael declared, his voice filled with emotion. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to face challenges together and to love you with all my heart," I replied, tears welling in my eyes. We sealed our promises with a kiss, and the congregation erupted into cheers. But Martha's applause was weak, her smile forced. I could see her whispering to Michael's sister, but I tried to ignore it. At the reception, the tension became unbearable. Guests were dancing and enjoying themselves, but Martha's presence loomed large. I decided to confront her. "Martha, is everything all right? You seem uncomfortable," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer. "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just wondering what my son sees in a police officer like you." I was taken aback by her bluntness, but managed to reply, "I love your son, Martha, and he loves me. That's all that matters." "Is it?" she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "I just hope you don't drag him into your dangerous world." "Mom, enough!" Michael intervened, his voice firm. Martha just huffed and walked away, leaving us both stunned. The rest of the evening was a blur. The toasts, the dancing, even cutting the cake felt overshadowed by Martha's cold attitude. Michael tried to lift my spirits, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage had started on a sour note. That night, as we left for our honeymoon, I looked back at the beautiful venue, and all I could see was Martha's cold eyes, filled with disapproval. The woman, who was now my mother-in-law, had made her feelings clear, and I knew that our future together would be anything but smooth. Our wedding was supposed to be the beginning of our happily ever after, but instead it had sown the seeds of a battle I never expected to fight. A battle that would test my love, my integrity, and my strength as a police officer. A battle that had only just begun. Moving in with Martha was a decision born out of necessity, not desire. Michael's father had passed away a few years ago, and he felt obligated to take care of his mother. But from the very first day, I realized that living under the same roof as Martha was going to be far from easy. The house itself was beautiful, filled with memories of Michael's childhood. But those memories were overshadowed by Martha's dominating presence. She had a way of making everything about herself, turning even the most trivial tasks into a battleground. "Kate, why is this house such a mess? Clean it up," she'd yell early in the morning, startling me out of sleep. "I'm doing my best, Martha." "Michael and I are both working, and we can't be here all the time," I'd reply, trying to keep my cool. "That's no excuse. This house used to be spotless when my husband was alive," she'd retort, her eyes filled with reproach. The situation escalated quickly. Martha's demands grew more unreasonable, her criticism more biting. My police training had prepared me for criminals, but nothing could prepare me for Martha's relentless onslaught. "What's this, Kate? A microwave dinner. My son deserves better," she'd complain, throwing the food into the trash. "Martha, I just worked a 12-hour shift. I'm doing the best I can," I'd argue, my patience wearing thin. "You call this your best? Pathetic," she'd snap, leaving the room in a huff. Michael tried to intervene, to stand up for me, but his attempts were in vain. His love for his mother clouded his judgment, and he often ended up caught in the crossfire. "Mom, please, let's be reasonable. Kate's doing a lot for this family. You need to appreciate her efforts," he'd plead. "I'll appreciate her when she starts acting like a proper wife," Martha would retort, her voice dripping with contempt. Our marriage, once filled with love and understanding, was slowly crumbling under Martha's relentless pressure. We began to argue not about us, but about her. Martha became the invisible third person in our relationship, a wedge driving us apart. The days turned into a nightmare, a never-ending cycle of demands, arguments, and tears. My strength as a police officer seemed useless against Martha's emotional manipulation. She had a way of making me feel small, inadequate, and worthless. And yet, I persevered. I loved Michael, and I wanted our marriage to work. But the strain was taking its toll on both of us. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. As the weeks wore on, I knew something had to give. I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells, constantly fearing Martha's next outburst. I needed to take control, to stand up for myself, and to fight back. But the biggest battle was still ahead of me, a discovery that would turn my world upside down and set me on a path I never expected to walk. Living with Martha was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about family, love, and justice. I was a police officer, trained to face danger and adversity, but nothing in my career had prepared me for the battle within my own home. A battle that was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. It was a day like any other in Martha's house, tense, exhausting, and filled with a never-ending list of chores. Michael was at work, and I was cleaning up after another one of Martha's tirades. "You missed a spot, Kate," she'd say, pointing at a barely notable mark on the floor. "You're really slipping." "I'm doing my best, Martha," I'd respond through gritted teeth, my patience running thin. "Your best isn't good enough," she'd retort, her voice dripping with disdain. It was while cleaning the kitchen in a cupboard that Martha always kept locked that I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. I'd accidentally knocked over a jar, and behind it, hidden from view, was a small package wrapped in plastic. Curiosity piqued. My instincts as a police officer kicked in. I carefully unwrapped the package and found drugs. A substantial amount. My blood ran cold. "What's that you have there, dear?" Martha's voice rang out from behind me, a hint of panic in her tone. "Martha, what is this? Why are there drugs in your cupboard?" I demanded, holding up the package. "That's none of your business, you nosy girl," she snapped, her face turning red with rage. "How dare you snoop around my house?" Your house? We live here too. And having drugs in the house is everyone's business. I shot back, anger bubbling up inside me. You don't understand, and you never will. You're a disappointment to this family because you're a police officer. You should leave this house and never come back, Martha yelled, her voice filled with venom. I was stunned, the words cutting me to the core. Martha, I can't ignore this. I have to report it, I said, my voice trembling. Go ahead. Ruin our family. You've already taken my son from me. Why not destroy everything else? She screamed, tears streaming down her face. My hands shaking, I called Michael and told him what I had found. He was as shocked as I was, but he stood by me. Kate, you have to do what's right. We can't ignore this. It's painful, but we have to face it, he said, his voice filled with anguish. That night, I reported the discovery to my precinct. The wheels of justice began to turn, and I knew that our lives would never be the same again. The discovery of the drugs was more than a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. Martha had drawn a line in the sand, and I had no choice but to cross it. Our home was no longer a battlefield. It was a war zone. A war between family and duty, love and justice. A war that was about to reach its tipping point. I was no longer just a daughter-in-law caught in a family feud. I was a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. A law that had been broken by the very person I had tried so hard to please. The storm had been brewing for a long time, and now it was about to break. The battle with Martha was far from over. It was only just beginning. Revenge is a word that had never resonated with me. As a police officer, my job was to protect and serve, to uphold the law without personal bias. But Martha's betrayal had turned my world upside down. It was not just an offense against the law, it was a personal affront. Her constant berating, her hidden secrets, and her unfounded hatred had pushed me to a place I never thought I'd find myself. A place where justice and revenge intertwined. After I reported the discovery to my superiors, an investigation was launched. My colleagues were supportive but wary, understanding the complexity of prosecuting a family member. Are you sure about this, Kate? This could get ugly, my partner, James, warned. I know, but I can't ignore it. This is about more than just Martha. It's about what's right, I replied, determination in my voice. The day finally arrived when the police came to our house. The look on Martha's face when they handcuffed her was a mixture of shock and defiance. Her eyes met mine, filled with accusation. You've destroyed this family, Kate. I hope you're happy, she spat, venom in her voice. I did what I had to do. You brought this on yourself, I retorted, my voice steady but my heart aching. Michael stood by me, his face pale and his eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. I love you, Kate, and I trust you, but this is tearing me apart, he whispered, tears in his eyes. I know, Michael, but we have to do what's right, even when it hurts, I said, holding him close. The trial was a drawn-out, agonizing process. Every day, I was torn between the principles I had sworn to uphold as a police officer and the pain it was causing my family. The courtroom was filled with tension, with Martha's cold eyes constantly fixed on me, her glare filled with accusation. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically, detailing the amount of drugs found in Martha's possession and the circumstances of their discovery. Officer Kate Thompson, could you please describe the day you found the illegal substances in Mrs. Martha Thompson's cupboard? The prosecutor asked, his voice firm. I was cleaning the kitchen and I stumbled upon the drugs hidden behind a jar, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I knew what it was, and I knew I had to report it. How did Mrs. Thompson react when you confronted her? He continued. She was angry and told me it was none of my business. She yelled at me, told me I was a disappointment, and asked me to leave the house, I recounted, tears welling in my eyes. The defense attorney was ruthless in cross-examination, twisting my words, trying to paint me as a vengeful daughter-in-law. Isn't it true, Officer Thompson, you never got along with Mrs. Thompson? That you had a motive to frame her? He asked, his voice dripping with insinuation. No, that's not true. I tried to get along with her. I found the drugs by accident, not out of malice, I protested, my voice rising. Objection, Your Honor! Leading the witness, the prosecutor interjected. Overruled. Continue, the judge said, his face stern. The trial continued with witnesses and experts testifying, each day becoming a blur of legal jargon and emotional turmoil. Michael was called to the stand, and his testimony was heartbreaking. Mr. Thompson, how would you describe your mother's relationship with your wife? The defense attorney asked, his voice soft. It was difficult. My mother never accepted Kate, but that doesn't mean she's guilty of this crime, Michael replied, his voice breaking. Did you ever witness any friction between them? Any arguments? The defense pressed on. Yes, they argued, but that doesn't make my wife a liar. She's an honorable police officer, and she did what she thought was right, Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. The closing arguments were passionate, both sides making their case. The jury deliberated, and the waiting was excruciating. The fear that Martha might be acquitted weighed heavily on me. Finally, the verdict came. Guilty. Martha's face was ashen as the judge handed down the sentence. Mrs. Thompson, you have been found guilty of possession with intent to distribute. You are hereby sentenced to 1 year in prison, he declared, his voice unwavering. As the gavel fell, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was high. My marriage was strained, my trust in family shattered. I hope you're happy now, Martha whispered as she was led away, her eyes filled with hatred. I did what I had to do, I replied quietly, my heart heavy. The trial was over, but the scars it left were deep and lasting. The path to healing was long and uncertain, and I knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I also knew that I had done the right thing, and that knowledge was a beacon of hope in the darkness. It was a reminder that justice, no matter how painful, was a value worth fighting for. The sunlight was a gentle caress on the morning of my wedding day. As I prepared, surrounded by close friends and family, my heart was filled with joy and excitement. I was about to marry Tom, the man I thought was the love of my life. Tom was charismatic, confident, and seemed genuinely devoted to me. We met at a friend's party, and our connection was instant. His smile was contagious, his laugh genuine, and our shared dreams for the future seemed perfectly aligned. But as I glanced in the mirror, a pang of unease struck me. I noticed Tom's mother glaring at me from the corner of the room. Her eyes were cold, her lips a thin line of disapproval. "What do you think of the dress, Mrs. Thompson?" I asked her, trying to break the ice. "It's decent," she replied dismissively, "but a woman of your age should have chosen something more modest." My sister Emily quickly intervened. "Linda looks beautiful, and this dress is perfect for her." I tried to shake off the unpleasant encounter as we headed to the venue. The ceremony was picturesque, set in a lovely garden filled with blooming flowers. The air was filled with the fragrance of roses, and our guests' happy faces reflected our joy. However, as the day wore on, I noticed something odd. Tom's mother continued to berate me, criticizing every detail. "Why did you choose these flowers? They look cheap," she hissed during the reception. I responded, keeping my composure. "I'm sorry they're not to your taste, but Tom and I chose them together and we love them." Her cold eyes remained unyielding, and Tom, standing nearby, said nothing. His silence stung, and I wondered why he didn't defend me. But something even more concerning caught my eye: Tom's persistent conversations with Emily. They seemed overly familiar, and he often ignored me to talk to her. I tried to brush it aside, telling myself it was just friendly banter. "Linda, are you okay?" Emily asked me at one point, noticing my concern. "Yes," I replied, forcing a smile, just enjoying the day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life was tainted by Tom's mother's hostility and Tom's strange behavior. As the celebration drew to a close, I tried to focus on the love I felt for Tom. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. The warning signs were there. I just didn't recognize them yet. That night, as Tom and I danced, I looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance. "I love you, Linda," he whispered, holding me close. "I love you too," I replied, wanting to believe that everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew that our marriage had begun on a note of discord. A shadow had fallen over our happiness, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. After the unsettling undertones of our wedding, I was determined to focus on our new life together. We moved into the house I had purchased long before meeting Tom, a cozy place filled with memories and now brimming with hope for our future. Tom was unemployed at the time, unable to find a job that suited him, He seemed intent to let me provide for both of us, leaning on my stable position at the company. At first, everything seemed perfect. We settled into our routines, enjoyed candlelit dinners, and shared dreams of what our life would be like. I felt a renewed sense of hope and happiness. But then the cracks started to appear. Tom became lethargic, spending his days lounging around the house or going out with friends, leaving me to juggle work and household responsibilities. "Linda, don't you think you're overreacting? I'm trying to find a job," he said one evening when I expressed concern. "I know you are, Tom, but it doesn't feel like we're working together as a team," I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. "I need you to contribute more." "We'll figure it out," he said dismissively, walking away from the conversation. His attitude started to change, and the loving, attentive man I married seemed to slip away. His late nights became more frequent, and sometimes he would come home drunk, reeking of alcohol, and unwilling to explain his whereabouts. "Linda, why are you making a big deal out of this?" he snapped one night, his eyes glazed over. "Because I care about you, Tom. I care about us," I pleaded, tears welling in my eyes. "What's happening to you?" "Nothing's happening! Just drop it!" he yelled, storming out of the room. The warmth of our relationship had turned cold, and I felt a growing distance between us. No matter how much I tried to talk to him about it, Tom shut down, erecting a wall I couldn't penetrate. The beautiful car I had bought him, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now seemed to be a tool for his escapades. I began to notice unfamiliar items in the house, and the phone would ring, but when I answered, the line would go dead. I confided in Emily, seeking her support and understanding. "Maybe he's just going through a phase, Linda," she suggested, concern in her eyes. "Give him some time." "I hope so, Emily," I replied, feeling the weight of uncertainty. "I just want my Tom back." But deep down, I knew that the Tom I married was slipping away. Our new beginning was crumbling, and I was powerless to stop it. Our home, once filled with love and laughter, was now clouded by tension and mistrust. The warning signs were growing stronger, and I was beginning to realize that our marriage was not what it seemed. The dream was turning into a nightmare, and I was trapped in it, unable to wake up. The dark clouds that had been gathering over our marriage finally burst one chilling night. The ring of the phone broke through the silence of the house, a shrill alarm that made my heart jump. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. It was Tom's mother. My hands trembling, I picked up the receiver. "Linda, dear," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Have you lost your husband?" "What do you mean?" I stammered, trying to hide my growing concern. "Oh, you must know what I mean. He's always out late, isn't he?" she purred, savoring each word. "He's with friends, Mrs. Thompson," I replied defensively. "Friends? Is that what he tells you?" she laughed, a cruel and mocking sound. "My dear, he's been cheating on you with your sister for 2 years. Even now, he's with her. Your sister, Emily, is much better than you, my dear." Her words were like knives, cutting deep into my soul. I felt the room spin, and my knees threatened to buckle. This couldn't be true. "You're lying!" I gasped, my voice breaking. "This is some sick joke." "I have no reason to lie, dear," she replied, her tone icy. "You may think you have won my son, but you're just a placeholder. You will never be good enough for him." The room was closing in on me, and I struggled to breathe. My mind reeled, and my heart ached as I recalled all the warning signs. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the growing distance between Tom and me. "I don't believe you," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Believe what you want? But you know it's true," she replied, a triumphant note in her voice. "You've always known." I hung up, my hands shaking, my mind in turmoil. I had to know the truth. I dialed Tom's number, desperate for answers. "Tom," I said, my voice trembling. "Where are you?" "Linda, I'm just out with friends," he said, his breathlessness raising alarm bells in my mind. "Tom, are you with Emily?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What? No, of course not," he stammered, but I could hear the lie in his voice. "Ton, I know," I said, my voice breaking. "Your mother told me everything." Silence. A heavy, crushing silence that seemed to last an eternity. "Linda, listen," he began, but I hung up, my world shattered. The truth was out, and it was more painful than I could have ever imagined. The man I loved, the sister I trusted, had betrayed me in the most cruel and unthinkable way. I sat alone, the weight of the revelation crushing me. My marriage, my family, my life had been a lie. The one person I thought I could trust had become a stranger, and the sister I loved had stabbed me in the back. I knew then that I had to take control of my life, to find the strength to face the betrayal and build a new path for myself and my unborn child. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to face it with courage and dignity. The time for blind trust was over. The time for action had begun. The next morning, I was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a cold, resolute determination. I knew what I had to do, and as the reality of my situation settled in, a clear path formed in my mind. I gathered the evidence, the late-night calls, the unfamiliar items, the pieces of a puzzle that now made a devastating picture. I knew Tom would come home, expecting to find his unsuspecting wife, but I was prepared. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking disheveled and guilty. His eyes widened when he saw the look in my eyes, a look he had never seen before. "Linda!" he began, but I cut him off. "Don't!" I said, my voice cold and steady. "I know everything." "Everything!" he stammered, his face paling. "Yes, Tom, everything." "Your affair with Emily, your lies, your betrayal," I said, my words like ice. "I know it all." "Linda, let me explain," he pleaded, tears in his eyes. "Explain?" I snapped. "What could you possibly say that would make this right?" "Linda, I love you! I made a mistake! Let's work this out!" he begged, reaching for me. "Don't touch me," I said, recoiling from his touch. "You don't get to say you love me after what you've done." "Linda, please," he sobbed, breaking down. "Give me a chance to make it right." "No, Tom," I replied, my voice unwavering. "There's no coming back from this. You destroyed us. You destroyed our family." "I'll do anything," he cried. "Anything you want." "You'll sign these divorce papers," I said, thrusting them in front of him, "and you'll leave my house." "Linda, don't do this," he begged, his voice breaking. "It's done, Tom," I said, my voice firm. "You did this, not me." He signed the papers, tears streaming down his face, his hand trembling. "I never meant for this to happen," he whispered. "You made your choice, Tom," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Now live with it." He left, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of despair. I watched him go, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over me. The confrontation was over, but the wounds were deep. I knew I had done the right thing, but the pain was unbearable. My marriage was over. My sister had betrayed me, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered by deceit and betrayal. But I knew I was strong. I had faced the man who had broken my heart and had stood my ground. I had taken control of my life, and I was determined to move forward. The future was uncertain, but I knew I could face it. I had taken the first step towards healing, towards rebuilding my life. The road would be long and difficult, but I was ready to walk it, knowing that I had the strength and courage to overcome anything. My revenge had begun, and I was prepared to see it through to the end. The legal proceedings began swiftly, a mechanical process that seemed to move both too quickly and agonizingly slow. Tom's betrayal had left a wound that festered with each passing day, and I wanted to close this chapter as soon as possible. I hired a determined and competent lawyer who specialized in messy divorce cases. In our initial meeting, she looked at the evidence and listened intently as I shared my story. "Linda, I understand this is a painful and difficult time for you," she said, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "But I want you to know that I'll fight for you. We'll make sure you get what you deserve." "Thank you," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I just want this to be over." "I know, and I'll do everything I can to make that happen," she promised. The battle lines were drawn. Tom, of course, tried to save face, pleading for forgiveness and mercy. But I remained resolute, my anger and pain fueling my determination to see justice done. During one of the mediation meetings, he looked at me, his eyes filled with desperation. "Linda, can't we talk about this?" he implored. "Can't we try to work things out?" "We're past that point, Tom," I replied, my voice steady, but my heart aching. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences." He hung his head, defeated and broken. I felt a pang of sympathy, but quickly pushed it away. He had brought this upon himself. The weeks dragged on, filled with paperwork, meetings, and bitter arguments. Tom's mother, unsurprisingly, made things more difficult, meddling and throwing accusations. "How could you do this to my son?" she spat at me during one of the court breaks. "You ruined his life." "Your son ruined his own life," I shot back, my anger boiling over. "He betrayed me, and now he has to face the consequences." "You'll regret this," she hissed, her eyes filled with malice. "I doubt that," I replied, turning away from her poisonous words. Finally, the day came when the judge granted the divorce. I was awarded the house, the car, and child support for our unborn child. "You've won, Linda," my lawyer said, smiling as we left the courtroom. "You stood strong and you got what you deserved." "I don't feel like I've won," I reply, looking out at the gray sky. "I've lost so much." "You've gained your freedom and your dignity," she said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "And you've shown your strength. That's a victory." I nodded, knowing she was right. The divorce was a painful but necessary step towards healing and moving on. That night, alone in my house, I felt a mixture of relief and emptiness. The battle was over, but the scars remained. I knew that the road ahead was still long and filled with challenges, but I also knew that I had the strength to face them. I had survived the betrayal, the heartache, and the legal battle. I was ready to rebuild my life, to create a future for myself and my child. The divorce had been a painful ending, but it was also a new beginning, a chance to start fresh, to find happiness again. I was ready to take that chance, knowing that I had the courage and the determination to make it a reality. The days following the divorce were a blur, filled with a flurry of activity as I set my revenge plan into motion. The legal battle was over, but there was still much to be done to truly put Tom and his betrayal behind me. I had been meticulous in my preparations, ensuring that everything was in place to make Tom pay for his deceit. The car he had been so proud of, a gift from me, was repossessed, leaving him stranded and humiliated. A friend of mine in the legal field helped me secure a restraining order against Tom's mother, keeping her toxic presence away from me and my unborn child. Then came the confrontation with Emily, my sister, the one who had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I invited her to my house, my emotions a volatile mix of rage, hurt, and disbelief. When she arrived, her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Linda, please, let me explain," she stammered as I glared at her. "Explain?" I snapped, my voice dripping with contempt. "How do you explain betraying your own sister?" "I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "It just happened. I never planned for this." "You never planned to sleep with my husband," I hissed, my anger reaching a boiling point. "You never planned to destroy my marriage." "Linda, please, let's talk about this," she pleaded, reaching for me. "Don't touch me," I spat, recoiling from her touch. "You're dead to me, Emily." Her face crumpled, and she fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Emily," I said, my voice cold and unfeeling. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." I turned away from her, leaving her broken and sobbing on the floor. My revenge was complete, but it was a hollow victory. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh, a wound that would take a long time to heal. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I sold the house, moving into a smaller, cozier place that felt like a fresh start. I found comfort in my work, throwing myself into my career and finding success and fulfillment. My friends and family rallied around me, supporting me and helping me heal. The revenge had been satisfying, but it was only a temporary fix. True healing came from within, from facing the pain and moving forward. I knew that I had the strength to do that, to build a new life for myself and my child. The revenge had been a necessary step, a way to reclaim my power and my dignity. But it was the choices I made after that, the way I chose to live my life, that truly defined me. I had been betrayed and hurt, but I had also shown my strength and resilience. I had taken control of my life and my destiny, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The revenge was over, but my journey was just beginning. I was ready to move on, to find happiness and peace again. I knew that I could do it, that I was strong enough to overcome anything. And as I looked to the future, I knew that I had the power to create the life I wanted, to find joy and fulfillment again. My revenge had been a necessary step, but it was the choices I made after that, the way I chose to live my life, that truly defined me. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength and the courage to face it.